I'm Lessa Sugan. Thanks for joining us on Connect Africa live on DSTV channel 421, GoTV channel 125, on myjoyonline.com and all of our social media handles. We are Joy News. Around the continent today, we have news from Sudan, Libya, Kenya and Mali. Watch this when we return. We'll also go into the details of what's happening at the 78th UN General Assembly happening in New York. Please stay.
The Sudanese army clashed with a local militia in Port Sudan when they intervened to dismantle a checkpoint the militiamen had set up to regulate the movement of goods out of the state. The armed militia are from the Belgian National Congress, led by Shiba Dirar. Following the clashes, the authorities in the Red Sea state declared a state of emergency and imposed a curfew in Port Sudan from 11 p.m. Protesters have burnt down the home of the mayor of Derna, Abdul Minam al-Gaithi, in Libya. The incident occurred when protesters gathered at the city's landmark Sahaba Mosque, chanting that top officials in Libya's eastern government be sacked. The protesters are demanding for answers to last week's catastrophic floods, which has claimed hundreds of lives.
And those are some of the major stories making the headlines across the African continent. Now to New York, because the United Nations is alarmed that its long-term agenda of eradicating abject poverty around the world by 2030 may not be achieved if immediate steps are not taken to ramp up strategies that will lead to the attainment of the goals. At the ongoing 78th General Assembly of the United Nations in New York, UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres told world leaders to recommit to the acceleration of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, which will recede in the next 7 years. The Agenda 2030 of leaving no one behind and tackling world poverty veered, of course, owing to the COVID-19 pandemic, leaving many more developing countries in Africa slowing down further. In view of this, Mr. Guterres says the SDGs may be left behind.
8 years ago, member states gathered in the hall to adopt the Sustainable Development Goals. With the world watching, including 193 young people in the balcony holding blue lamps of hope, you made a solemn promise. A promise to build a world of health, progress and opportunity for all. A promise to leave no one behind. And a promise to pay for it. This was not a promise made to one another as diplomats from the comfort of this chamber. It was always a promise to people. People crushed under the grinding wheels of poverty. People starving in a world of plenty. Children denied a seat in a classroom. Families fleeing conflict, seeking a better life. Parents watching helplessly as their children die of preventable disease. People losing hope because they can't find a job or a safety net when they need it. Entire communities literally on devastation's doorstep because of changing climate. So the SDGs aren't just a list of goals. They carry the hopes, dreams, rights and expectations of people everywhere. And they provide the surest path to living up to our obligations under the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, now in its 75th year. Yet today, only 15% of the targets are on track, and many are going in reverse. Instead of leaving no one behind, we risk leaving the SDGs behind. So, Excellencies, the SDGs need a global rescue plan.
Antonio Guterres there, worried about the attainment of the UN SDGs as it stands now. World leaders are making their comments as part of the ongoing debate at the UN headquarters in New York. Well, let's cross over now and get some updates on some of the comments being made so far. Joining us live from the UN headquarters is Wani Isaac Kenyi, a journalist working for the Insider, for the Insider in South Sudan. But he's joining us from New York as we speak, monitoring events and the debates ongoing there in the U.S. And Kenny, thank you for joining us today again. Of course, a number of speakers have made their speeches. Of course, the U.S. President, Mr. Biden, and other world leaders present there, making a clear message about the need for a peaceful order to attain the UN SDGs. And all of them are, first of all, making the case for world peace, for instance, in the context of the latest geopolitics and tension that we have relating to the Russian-Ukraine war. How is that playing out in the United Nations headquarters from where you report?
Thank you. Definitely, Ukraine is top of the agenda in this debate, especially when the debate opened this morning, and most leaders coming up to condemn the Russian invasion to Ukraine, and also other leaders also pointing to the fact that it seems like it's a double standards that the focus are shifting only to Ukraine, while other countries are being left behind. Specifically, Joe Biden made a statement that Russia alone bears responsibility for this war, and Russia alone has the power to end this very war. In a counter statement, when the Colombian president came in to give his speech, he pointed to the fact that other countries are being left behind. Palestinian war, the conflict in Palestine and between Palestine and Israel is one thing he pointed at. He also made a special reference to the invasion that happened years back between the United States and Iraq. So this clearly tells us that there's a mixed feelings regarding the focus of world leaders when it comes to the war in Ukraine. So it's really dominating the headlines right here.
I see. And the Ukrainian President Zelensky is also present, as we understand. What kind of solidarity is it receiving at the United Nations General Assembly?
Well, after Joe Biden made his final speech and everyone was applauding his speech, and also he was present there, he was so happy with the speech that was made by Joe Biden. And it is now dependent on which country is more allied to which one, because most of the heads of states and representatives who were here were happy with the statements being made in support of Ukraine, but also with other statements coming out from some presidents, especially with reference to the conflict in Palestine. It shows clearly that there is a focus more on Ukraine than the other. So the support for Ukraine is there, but also there is that small part that many countries are looking at, also turning their attention not just on Ukraine, but also some of the countries. So yes, the support is there for Ukraine.
I see. But the biggest issue confronting Africa now is that huge financing gap when it comes to the UN SDGs. How much of a worry is that for these leaders at the UN General Assembly as we speak?
True. It's such a worry because most of this financing comes with the conditions that are attached to them are not favorable for African countries, and not just African countries, but the developing countries that have the interest rates. All these are kind of affecting the countries, because if the conditions are not very favorable, it makes it very difficult. As such, it's been that call the new policies regarding our financing. So over the course of the week, we will still hear more from other African countries. Some few minutes ago, the South African President Cyril Ramaphosa was speaking, and he also made specific references to that. So we wait to see how it plays out during the week.
And what other issues are coming up? I mean, other leaders have spoken. You were just talking about Cyril Ramaphosa, who a moment ago just wrapped up his speech at the UN General Assembly, pointing out to the fact that Africa needs the Africa solution approach, and part of it has got to do with the Africa Continental Free Trade Area Agreement. Are other African leaders also in support of this, judging from their posture?
Well, yes, they seemed happy uploading to the speech, and of course, we still wait to see when they take the stage and also air their grievances or try to give their speech. We will see what their focus is, because it's hard to judge based on the clapping of hands and their body language when they are still seated. It's when they get to that stage that we know where it hurts most, and it only comes when they all take the center stage to give their speech during this debate. But of course, a lot of things are being also discussed at the background. Mostly the climate issues. It's also another dominant issue that is being discussed at this debate, and we have a lot of media zones, sustainable development goal zones that are set up, especially related to climate justice, that are being discussed throughout the day, and it plays to the fact that there is so much focus by the world leaders on trying to really reduce the climate issues that is facing the entire world.
And we're grateful that, of course, you're spending some time with us here on the show. Wani Isaac Kenye, journalist working for The Insider in South Sudan, but joining us from New York to give us some updates from the UN General Assembly. Grateful for your time. The Economic Community of West African States, ECOWAS, is confronted with pressing challenges posed by the widespread availability of weapons and ammunition within the region. Recognizing the importance of arms control and disarmament initiatives in addressing this issue, the Economic Community of West African States is aiming to reduce the number of weapons in circulation and also to establish effective regulatory frameworks, and also try as much as possible to eliminate certain categories of weapon systems, despite various binding and non-binding agreements, as well as bilateral and multilateral treaties. The proliferations of ammunition continues to pose a significant threat to regional, continental and global security. On the sidelines of a summit underway here in Accra to discuss the proliferation of arms, I caught up with Robin Gaius. He's the head of the United Nations Institute for Disarmament Research, as we sat down around the conversation on issues of disarmament. You're here attending the conference as well, and we know that the West Africa sub-region is grappling with issues of, light weapon infiltration and all of that. First of all, what is your expectation going into the conference, and what are you equally expecting from, the variety of stakeholders that are assembled here in Accra?
Yeah, well, thanks for having me, and it's great to be in Accra. The expectation for the seminar is to really deepen our collaboration in West Africa with ECOWAS and with West African ECOWAS member states. It's part of a series of conferences which we started last year and which we hope to extend really into the future, to focus on the full spectrum and different issues of disarmament, arms control and non-proliferation issues. And the spectrum is wide, and at the end of the day, of course, all that we do informs conflict prevention efforts and the reduction of armed violence, hopefully. So the expectation here for the seminar really is to have a platform to exchange views with West African states, ECOWAS member states, ECOWAS itself, exchange views to inform our research, to see how what we do in Geneva and as a UN think tank, how that can help inform policies on weapon and ammunition management.
The non-proliferation treaty obviously is at risk, to face the facts, and looking at what's happening around the world, there is indeed, as many experts say, the need to disarm and to promote peace across not just the African continent but around the world. How crucial is that, and how important is that to African countries, especially those in West Africa?
I think it's crucial around the world, and it's crucial in Africa. You're right, and we're not naive about this. Disarmament is not in a good state right now. There's enormous competition, including military, great competition, of course, around the world, armed conflicts, and so on. And for us, of course, disarmament, we don't look at it in isolation. It's connected to everything else. Conflict, disarmament issues are deeply interlinked with development issues. And I think, therefore, it's an issue that must concern us all.
African governments, specifically those in the West Africa sub-region, such as ECOWAS member states, how can they effectively collaborate to, disarm and to move towards a regime of completely dealing with these issues of the infiltration of light weapons and all others?
Yeah, I mean, there are different layers and fora at the regional level, at the more local level, and where we often work also at the multilateral level. And I think the answer is going to be a package deal. It can only happen if you work at all of these levels, and they all interlink with one another. And that's really what we're trying to support as a UN think tank entity. The multilateral level, linking it to regional efforts, understanding what is happening in countries, what are the specific problems that need solutions, so that we don't have, lofty debates, but really problem-oriented debates, and then bringing it back to the multilateral level and hopefully integrating it into treaty discussions or even treaties and instruments going forward.
And let's talk about your initial findings. What are some of them, and what are some of the key factors going into the engagement?
Yeah, so we, since 2016, have been conducting in West Africa weapons and ammunition management baseline assessments. And we found that effective weapons and ammunition management in countries can do a great deal in mitigating drivers of conflict and armed violence. And so we've developed a whole methodology and different tools that we bring to states, discuss with states, and then together we try to implement them in support of the states at the national level, really with the aim to enhance their weapons and ammunition management policies. And I think that has worked quite well. This is why the collaboration has started in 2016 and is ongoing today in 2023. So I do think countries are benefiting from this collaboration, and if anything, we hope to be expanding and continuing it in the future.
Finally, is there any message to African governments on disarmament?
Well, I think we all need to act together jointly, and we can all do more. Of course, it's a difficult state of the world, and the voice of African nations in the entire debate at the multilateral level is extremely important.
Grateful. So, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Also present at this event was officials of the National Commission on Small Arms from Ghana. I spoke to Jocelyn Jifa Owens Day, who's the research officer there at the Commission, pointing out the daily increase in the circulation of light weapons and ammunition across the country. We're all gathered here monitoring developments going on at the conference organized by ECOWAS. But for the Small Arms Commission, why would you say that this conference is very much important to you as a commission?
Thank you very much for having me. As a commission, I'll say that this conference is very important because it's bringing together other member states from the ECOWAS region. We are going to share ideas, share methods that have worked for other countries to also implement it, and they can also learn from us and take something from us, because the issue of weapons and then proliferation in the West African region is becoming disturbing, and it is having an impact on gender, especially the women and the children.
How much of a challenge is it for the Commission in terms of the influx and the numbers by the day? How is it looking like for us?
I would say that in the first quarter of the year for Ghana, it's been relatively low, but after the first quarter, it has shot up by months. So as we are getting towards the end of the year, what we are worried about is that the figures might keep going up. And that is something that we are looking to prevent as a commission.
Well, when you say it's going up, give us an idea of how bad the situation is.
I would say the situation is not the best, but thankfully for Ghana, it is not, let me say, as bad as other West African countries, because we have a substantial level of peace and security in Ghana. But we do not want it to get to the point where we are unable to control it, and then it leads into conflict that would lead to loss of lives and other properties.
So say this year alone, what is the trend that you've noticed in terms of how numbers keep going up?
So from what we've noticed, it appears that every month the numbers go up. from the previous month. So for example, if say in the month of May we had about 15 cases involving small arms and light weapons, you realize that in the following month we have close to about 20. The numbers are not very specific precisely. Though, it's just an estimate. Yes.
So they keep surging every month.
Every month.
What are the potential implications, for national security, and why should we all as Ghanaians be concerned about this?
We should be concerned because the issue is around us. You know, we do not have the issue directly in Ghana, but when you look at, let me say, our neighboring countries, the issue persists. And if we do not take care and secure our borders, if we are not security-minded enough, we are going to have a strong influx of these weapons coming into the country, which we do not want. The good thing is that they are all involved in this meeting. We have the national security in the meeting. We have the National Commission on Small Arms and Light Weapons. We also have the Firearms Division of the Ghana Police Service all in this conference. So it's something that we are working together to prevent.
For the Small Arms Commission, what message do you have for Ghanaians as to how they can also play a role in tackling this influx of, light weapons into the country?
Okay, I would say that we should all be mindful of our environment. If you see something, you should say something. I believe the National Security has started that initiative. If you suspect someone fraudulent in your neighborhood, a face that is unknown suddenly appears in your neighborhood, I think you should alert the authorities. We should also be vigilant of our environment because it is important. There's no way to know that something is going to happen the next minute, but once you are vigilant enough, you should be able to sense some danger and then try to avert it. But to all Ghanaians, let's try to keep the peace that we have, because I think it is commendable that we have a certain level of peace in the country. So let's try to keep it up for our own sake.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
And one of the potential dangers of the proliferation of ammunitions, and not just in West Africa but across the world, is the increase in the number of conflicts that we have happening around the world. Africa is said to be reeling under the effects of the Russian-Ukraine war. So we take you back to New York, where the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has just addressed the 78th UN General Assembly. We can now listen to excerpts of his statement as he speaks to the UN.
More than 45 nations saw how important it is to make Ukrainian food products available on the market, from Algeria to Spain to Indonesia and China. And even now, when Russia has undermined the Black Sea Grain Initiative, we are working to ensure food stability. And I hope that many of you will join us in these efforts. We launched a temporary sea export corridor from our ports, and we are working hard to preserve the land routes for grain exports. And it is alarming to see how some our friends in Europe play out solidarity in political theater, making thriller from the grain. And they may seem to play their own role, but in fact, they are helping set the stage to a Moscow actor. Second, weaponization of energy. Many times the world has witnessed Russia using energy as a weapon. Kremlin weaponized oil and gas to weaken the leaders of other countries when they came to the Red Square. And now this threat is even greater. Russia is weaponizing nuclear energy. Not only it is spreading its unreliable nuclear power plant construction technologies, but it is also turning other countries' power plants into real dirty bombs. Look, please, what Russia did to our Zaporizhia power plant. Shelled it, occupied it, and now blackmails others with radiation leaks. Is there any sense to reduce nuclear weapons when Russia is weaponizing nuclear power plants? Scary question. The global security architecture offers no response or protection against such a treacherous radiation threat, and there is no accountability for radiation blackmailers so far. The short example is children. Children. Unfortunately, various terrorist groups abduct children to put pressure on their families and societies. But never before the mass kidnapping and deportation would become a part of the government policy. Not until now. We know the names of tens of thousands of children and have evidence on hundreds of thousands of others kidnapped by Russia in the occupied territories of Ukraine and later deported. The International Criminal Court issued arrest warrant for Putin for this crime. And we are trying to get children back home. But time goes by. What will happen with them? What will happen to them? Those children in Russia are taught to hate Ukraine, and all ties with their families are broken. And this is clearly a genocide. When hatred is weaponized against one nation, it never stops there. Each decade, Russia starts a new war. Parts of Moldova and Georgia remain occupied. Russia turned Syria into ruins. And if not Russia, the chemical weapons would have never been used there in Syria. Russia has almost swallowed Belarus. It is obviously threatening Kazakhstan and other Baltic states. And the goal of the present war against Ukraine is to turn our land, our people, our lives, our resources into a weapon against you, against the international rules-based order. Many seats in the General Assembly Hall may become empty if Russia succeeds with its treachery and aggression.
And of course, be sure that here on Connect Africa, we'll bring you updates and fallouts from the 78th United Nations General Assembly. But that's all we have for you in this package. I'm Blessed Sugan. Log on to myjoyonline.com. We have stories for you there. Thanks for spending some time with us. We'll see you again.